Thank you for having me once again, Jessica. It has been a very busy 2000 and what's this, 23 for the vaping industry in South Africa. So quite a few interesting developments that took place rather in the last half of the year. I think worth noting was the very beginning of public hearings on the tobacco control bill. So what that means was Parliament going into different provinces and soliciting input on the provisions, or rather the proposals of the bill from the wider community. So that was a big milestone in the process. Another big thing that took place was the South African Bureau of Standards Technical Committee approved the draft standards that are now ready for publication for public comments. That's a big step for us. We are told it's imminent. The publication of those standards is imminent. So we're really waiting, to have that proceed in the next month or so. And another big development in the second half of last year was the Vaping Association formed a partnership, a very important partnership, with an organization called it's called the Response. What's this? It's a waste management program, where we will pilot together with these guys who are very knowledgeable in the space of waste management. We will pilot a program that looks at how do we dispose of vaping waste responsibly for South Africa. So those, I'd say, are the three main important developments that took place late last year.
I like the sound of the waste management program. I think that's obviously a very responsible thing that the vaping industry needs to be putting in place now in a more structured way, perhaps. Do you have any information about that in more detail for this year? So do you have any key milestones or timings for that waste management program specifically?
It's not a new thing, Jessica. I mean, the actual program under the Department of Forestry and Environmental Affairs was initiated a couple of years ago. However, it's new for the industry in the sense that when it started, our tonnage as an industry in terms of waste did not qualify for us to be part of the program. However, I mean, globally, the rise or the influx of disposables has necessitated that we put something in place. So as the vaping industry, we've then said, instead of individual companies disposing of their waste in their own way, why not have an industry-wide initiative where everyone learns, because this is new to us. We haven't done something like this before. So it's called the Extended Producer Program that falls under the Department of Forestry and Environmental Affairs. So what in IWASA, the organization is called IWASA, they are called the Extended Producer Responsibility Waste Association of South Africa. What they then do is they will look at, they've looked at rather the vaping industry in South Africa, where we are mostly found, so in different provinces, etc., to say, as a start, let's identify a province where we can then pilot a program, and based on the results of that pilot, then we are able to roll it out. So in this first quarter, actually, the expectation is that the pilot should be going live with this association. And that's something that's quite exciting for us, because it extends beyond just the vaping industry. I think environmental responsibility is all our responsibility, and the industry is taking it quite seriously.
Absolutely. That sounds really, really positive. And where could our audience read more about that, even specifically on metrics or timings, or just having regular updates this year?
We share. So the first time the partnership was announced, we had a press release, and it was covered quite extensively in our local media. This is in South Africa, and we also share on our platforms, on the Vapour Products Association social media platforms. So for any new developments, we will definitely be sharing that information out, because I think what we appreciate or also understand is that before such an undertaking, an education and awareness campaign needs to precede the actual big rollout of that thing. So that's something that's in the pipeline on our end. Our PR team is working hard to develop a ABCD kind of campaign, you know, the basics, going back to the basics, where we educate not just consumers, but also our retailers on how they can be the stewards or leaders in pioneering this program. So all of that stuff will be shared on our social medias and as well as the newsletter that goes out at the end of March.
Fantastic. So that's the VPASA website. You have the newsletter you can sign up for there. And then the press releases get launched on the website as well. And then you have a VPASA X account, which people can follow.
Precisely. Yes.
Brilliant.
That's correct.
Thank you. That sounds great. I'd like to talk a bit about nicotine now, because as we know in this industry, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, demonization of nicotine and overhype of its dangers or risks, when in fact we know it's a relatively harmless drug. So how is nicotine classified in South Africa and how is it regulated?
It's currently classified, so under the Medicines and Related Products Act, it is actually classified as a Schedule 3. And it becomes a Schedule 3 when it is used, one, in the aid of smoking cessation, as well as when it's used as a substitute for tobacco products. And there's other different classifications of Schedule 2 when it's mixed with when you find it in what's this, NRTs, for example, etc. And then you also have the industrial grade nicotine that would be used for your pesticides and that kind of thing. That's a different ball game altogether. But I think for us, it's not really about the classification is important, but I think the narrative that's driving the bill that we have seeks to demonize nicotine, like you've said. So it disregards this classification. It disregards what nicotine is used for, what it is, this benign product, you know, that does not do anything, similar to caffeine, etc., etc. But because of the political and ideological agenda, it has become a scapegoat, you know, where it's no longer just about vaping or other less harmful products that contain nicotine, but it's now about nicotine. And I mean, we've seen it quite extensively at the public hearings, where you find public health individuals coming in and not talking about the bill, but rather just focusing straight on nicotine and how it's killing people. It does all sorts of things. So it's quite clear that the available evidence on what nicotine is and is not, and its nature is ignored deliberately, simply because we are driving a particular narrative, which we are seeing across the world when it comes to the classification, or rather how we talk about nicotine, and not necessarily the correct classification of it under any particular act.
Exactly, that was really well said, very concisely put. And in June of last year, nicotine and nicotine substitute solutions in vaping products are taxed at a flat excise duty rate of 2.90 Rand per mil. And the new tax will affect disposables the least and e-liquids sold in large containers the most. What effect do you think this will have on consumers?
Oh, the issue of excise, Jessica. There's been new developments actually as of late February, where the Minister of Finance made an announcement where that rate of 2.90 Rand has since been adjusted by an inflation increase to 3.04 Rand, effective immediately. So what you have is a fiscal policy that is not grounded on any evidence, because, as you've rightfully said, the excise was put in place in June of last year. So we haven't even passed a year where you are able to say this has been the effect of the tax. The time that has passed is not long enough for you to propose an increase on the actual tax. So that's another bone of contention that we have, that how do you propose an increase on a tax when we haven't had enough time? Our understanding has always been that a 12-month period needs to lapse before you are able to then review, be it inflationary increase or inflation plus, it doesn't make a difference. So from the onset, our call has always been that an increase in tax makes it very difficult for South African smokers that are looking for a less harmful alternative to switch, because the products become more expensive. What we've then seen is that we now have an influx of disposable products which are coming into the country, and the nicotine content is insane because there are no standards, because there's no regulation. People are just bringing in products as they see fit. So the danger right there is that the product that is least affected, as you've said, is the disposables. And people are now buying more of the disposables. And when I say people, that extends also to young people, because the prices for those products is quite not that bad. People can afford to buy them. And we've always cautioned about the unintended consequences of where you're saying you're increasing the prices to curb the use of vaping products by young people. You're actually just increasing it, because the price difference you find for a closed system for a disposable, it would increase by something like R2, whereas an e-liquid, 100 milliliter liquid for open systems, more than doubles in price, and we know who's buying those products. So a lot of these things, I think the arguments are the same across the board. We've seen in countries where a tax was introduced and it had the exact opposite effect. That's what we are expecting to see as well from a South African point of view.
Okay. Do you have any updates on the potential ban that was proposed by the government last year? Banning e-cigarettes, yeah.
No, there wasn't a ban proposal. It was more we need to look into these disposables,
Okay.
and so there was never any official position that was taken. And what often happens with developing nations, obviously, is that when a developed nation takes a position, when there's changes in your Australias, in your New Zealand, in your UK, etc., that impacts the narrative as well this side. It does not necessarily translate into a policy change, but the narrative obviously does change. And you see this in how stuff is reported in the media. And that ban was, I would say, an overreach by media to say that's what's on the cards, when it was simply let's talk about this, because you can't ban something that currently is not regulated. We're still looking for a regulatory framework for it. So there are those steps that would still need to take place. Have a regulatory framework, see if it's working or not. And that requires up to a 5-year period, because I think it would be premature to ban any products without testing out the rules that you've put in place. So I don't believe that's on the cards for South Africa.
Great. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That's much, much clearer. And in terms of this year, just for my final question, what do you and your role with VPASA have planned? Anything exciting, anything new, other than what you've already mentioned?
There's always new developments in the space, and I think the thing that will never change is the need for education and awareness. I think we can never get tired of educating, from regulators to communities to public health individuals, etc. So that's an area that we will continue to do. And I think the exciting bit then is the form in which it takes. There has been an interest from the lower LSMs in South Africa. And I think that has come out of the public hearings, where people are saying, but we don't want to be left behind, So the conversations need to now change to say, how do we accommodate that grouping? Because the issue of cost of these products becomes an important point to consider. And the fact that these are individuals who predominantly use your illicit products, which are dead cheap, what would the shift to vaping look like for them? Are there products that could potentially accommodate that group? Because unfortunately in South Africa, that's the majority of smokers. So I'm quite excited about that element of things. We don't have the answers in terms of are there products that they can use. Currently, there aren't, because when you look at the cost of an illicit pack of cigarettes, cigarettes, it's not the same as an entry-level disposable, so we need to get to that point. So that's one interesting one. And obviously the waste management is really something that we are really excited about. And another big one, which we always do, is the youth access prevention. But again, I think it needs to take a different turn where we are sharing responsibility, because what we found over the past 2 years is that the industry is expected to do the driving of such initiatives and education. But now we're saying parents have a role to play, guardians have a role to play, schools have a role to play. How do we share responsibility in ensuring that kids are educated appropriately to take the right decisions when it comes to experimenting with vaping products?